A while ago in a video I did about BioShock, I said it was my favorite game of all time. Well, it was always between that and Obsidian's masterpiece, Fallout New Vegas. And with such renewed interest in the series thanks to the Amazon Prime series, which everyone is talking about, also great by the way, I decided why not try to tackle a Fallout Iceberg. Now, yes, this topic has been done seemingly to death, but you know the same thing could be said about the Dragon Ball Iceberg, and that video did pretty well, and I like to make these videos as obnoxiously long as possible, so today I thought I'd sort of create my own iceberg, a mishmash of other Fallout icebergs I saw, along with a few other entries I personally thought should be included on the list, from the most well-known facts and lore, to the most obscure secrets, Easter eggs, pieces of cut content, mysteries, insane conspiracy theories, weird spin-offs, cancelled productions, lost stories, you name it. We're going into everything the Fallout series has to offer as we dive deep into the Fallout Iceberg Explained. Tier 1. Vault Experiments. A staple of the series at this point, and one of the many hidden secrets of Vault Tech, a pre-war defense corporation hired to create vaults in the case of a nuclear disaster, so that some people in America may survive and repopulate until eventually when the Earth is thought to be safe enough to inhabit again, they can come to the surface and reclaim it, hence the term Reclamation Day. However, as we know, there is a catch. Because, well, not only did we find out some crazy lore from the TV show, which we'll get into in its own entry, but also a lot of the vaults serve a different purpose, as experiments. Some were fairly benign, while others were incredibly disturbing and questionable to say the least. But if you were one of the lucky ones to get a vault like 69, which as aptly named was just 1,000 people consisting of 999 women and 1 man, or maybe you get lucky enough to be in a control vault which has no experiment at all and is just a control variable used to compare against the data gathered from the other experiments, such as with Vault 3. But as we see in New Vegas, things can still turn out pretty bad. Anything can happen in the wasteland. However, some of the most notable and interesting vault experiments that I could find were Vault 11 found in New Vegas, which cruelly made its participants sacrifice one person every year in order to avoid group punishment, using elections to choose the person, only for this to cause the destruction of the vault itself, when in reality the experiment was simply testing the vault dwellers' willingness to sacrifice their own friends and family, as there was no collective punishment in place. All they had to do was not do it. Next, there's Vault 12 from the first game, which infamously turned all its residents into ghouls as the experiment, left the vault door improperly closed, which led to long-term exposure to the radiation of the outside world. Vault 87 from Fallout 3 similarly turned everyone into super mutants using the FEV virus. Again, in Fallout 3, Vault 92 tested some sort of white noise which drove its inhabitants insane, leading them to all kill each other. Not really disturbing, but interesting nonetheless is Vault 15, which birthed not only the NCR, but also the gangs of the Great Khans, Jackals, and Vipers, as a large population of diverse religious and ethnic backgrounds were made to live amongst each other. There's also Vault 22, which led its dwellers into becoming the spore carrier abominations, which wasn't intentional, but was the result of using genetically modified crops. Still very creepy though, and yeah, I could go on, but we'd be here forever. There's definitely no shortage of messed up and interesting vault experiments in the series, and I'm sure if we ever get a Fallout 5, we'll have even more interesting vault lore to delve into. Fallout 4 Pip-Boy games. So Fallout 4, despite all its faults, definitely put a lot of effort into the Pip-Boy. It has a ton of new animations, and despite in my opinion I think being a little less intuitive than previous iterations, and a bit of a if it's not broke don't fix it scenario, well at least you can't argue it's definitely had a lot of attention put into the details with it, whether it be animations, icons, what have you. There's even a few games which can be found and played on it via holotapes. They're pretty basic, but still a pretty cool inclusion, I think, even if most players won't spend much time playing them. You've got Atomic Command, a game in which you shoot down missiles before they can destroy American monuments, based on a real game called Missile Command from 1980. Then there's Pitfall, based on Pitfall, a side-scrolling adventure game where you maneuver around radioactive creatures and obstacles to collect bobbleheads. Red Menace, inspired by Donkey Kong, where you dodge barrels and have to climb ladders and avoid obstacles to try and rescue a woman. Zeta Invaders, very similar to Space Invaders, where you shoot down UFOs. A text-based role-playing game called Grognak and the Ruby Ruins, inspired by The Bard's Tale from 1985, and a game was even included in the Automatron DLC of the same name, in which you run around and shoot various robots before proceeding to the next stage, clearly based on 1982's Robotron 2084. There was even a cut Pip-Boy game called Captain Cosmos in Jangle's Bad Day, although not much is known about it. 16 times the detail.
And it's our biggest one yet. It is 4 times the size of Fallout 4. And this time it features all new rendering, lighting, and landscape technology. It allows us to have 16 times the detail and even view distant weather systems across the map.
This is a classic and memed quote from the almighty Todd Howard himself, which you've likely heard before even if you're unfamiliar with the Fallout franchise. Basically during a press conference discussing the then upcoming Fallout 76, well, you know how Todd Howard is. He's been known to play up the truth a little, as it were, when it comes to his games. And this is no different, claiming famously that Fallout 76 would have 16 times the detail as Fallout 4. Whatever that actually means. I mean, seriously, what is he even talking about here? Because we know Fallout 76 is essentially just online Fallout 4. So what was he trying to say with this? I don't know, maybe 16 times more resolution on the textures, but I doubt it. 16 times the draw distance, maybe? Or did he mean 16 times the features? Who knows?
All of this just works. It's not, I'm not kidding.
Fallout New Vegas Metacritic bonus. This is a very sad and unfortunate fact about the development of Fallout New Vegas, because Bethesda had a somewhat strange deal with Obsidian that if they reached or exceeded a Metacritic score of 85, then they would receive bonus royalties as part of their contract agreement. However, as fate would have it, the game only got an 84, 1 point away from getting the deal. This whole thing is kind of strange to begin with, to be honest, because the way Metacritic scores work is they take scores from different gaming journalists and established reviewers, scores out of 100 mind you, add them all up together and divide by the number of reviews to get the average score, which in this case was 84. However, if you look at the user score, which not always but generally is going to be a better judge of the quality of a game, it sits at a much higher 87, with over 1700 user ratings combined, whereas the critic reviews only account for 81 reviews total. Not the greatest sample size, although with the user scores you're gonna have people, you know, review bombing and whatnot, so it's not always going to be accurate either, but still, this kinda just hurts, especially as a huge fan of New Vegas. Like, with a game that only had 18 months of total development time, which ended up being one of the best games of all time, to only get an 84 and not receive their bonuses, like really, come on, they deserved it. And I mean, an 84 is nothing to scoff at, but I can't help but think these reviewers did not have enough time to sit with the game. I think it really takes many hours and multiple playthroughs to really appreciate the complexity and creativity behind this game, and I honestly think possibly the reason it missed the mark ever so slightly was because of the stigma surrounding it reusing the Fallout 3 engine and assets, leading people to call it a Fallout 3 DLC. Ouch. Like, yes, you gotta give a lot of credit to Bethesda for making that original Fallout 3 engine, which is great, right? I mean, VATS and everything, the way they transitioned Fallout from top-down turn-based to first-person shooter, it was all just brilliant. But let's be honest for a second. New Vegas is better than Fallout 3 in every conceivable way. Let's just call it what it is. And they even got Fallout 4 at a higher metascore than Fallout New Vegas. Bruh. Amazon Fallout Show. What can I say? Like everyone else, I got sucked back into the world of Fallout thanks to the show, and I've been having a blast revisiting New Vegas and even 4 thanks to this great series on Amazon Prime Video. It's been praised by most fans, although it has drawn some criticism for some of its world-building aspects, which I can kind of understand, but the show is just so fun and fresh that I can look past most of its flaws for the most part. There is one specific lore direction regarding a specific town that didn't really sit right with me, but maybe it will be explained better in the next season. Overall though, it was a great first season of the show. I'm hyped for more content, and I'm glad so many people are getting into Fallout because of it. The show has a great cast of talented actors who seem to know and respect the source material, and it's clear there is a ton of passion behind the project in general, given the amount of detail going into the props, sets, and even the references to just about every entry in the series. Go watch it if you haven't seen it already. Over 200 endings. Another Todd Howard quote, which sort of aged poorly. This time he was discussing Fallout 3 way back when, and yeah, most of us know by now, there are nowhere near 200 different endings. However, I will say if you count the ending being different if it has different slides, then yes, there are a few changes when it comes to your ending based on certain decisions, mainly the final one, but yeah, add that to the Sweet Little Lies collection. Love you, Todd. Vault-Tec started the Great War. Okay, so here's a bit of a crazy lore drop and a spoiler from the TV show. Sorry about that, I tried to not include too many, but I'm hoping if you're a Fallout fan you've already watched it by now. And it was quite a popular theory back in the day actually, which has now been confirmed. So I kinda had to include it, but yeah, spoiler alert for the Fallout show. Skip to the next entry if you don't want to know the full context, although we still really don't know all of it, to be honest. I hope it gets expanded upon in season 2, but in the finale titled The Beginning, the Ghoul's wife, Barb Howard, in a meeting with all the big Vault-Tec people, including Mr. House from New Vegas and Sinclair from Dead Money. She basically says in the meeting that in order to ensure the success of Vault-Tec and for their experiments to take place, and for them to have complete power, then they have to drop the bombs themselves and start the Great War. Which is a theory people had for years. I mean, it makes sense to a degree, although it is a little bit wild. I mean, you put this much time, money, and resources into capitalizing off of the end of the world, at that point you might as well just start the end, right? So maybe it is a metaphorical dropping of the bombs, you know, like somehow influencing politics and getting one side to drop the first bomb rather than literally physically nuking the world first, but we still really don't know the full details as of now. Wild Wasteland. Wild Wasteland is an iconic trait in Fallout New Vegas and one of the best choices to select in your builds, as it doesn't really have any penalties besides the fact that you miss out on the unique Gauss rifle, the YCS-186, but in exchange you get the much better Alien Blaster, one of the most overpowered guns in the whole game. What is this trait though? Well, it adds a bunch of random encounters and references to strange things and pieces of media like Indiana Jones. There's some Monty Python gags, Star Wars jokes, and even aliens, along with their unique alien UFOs and blaster, which like I said is a super broken weapon. Also, most traits in the game have some sort of heavy drawback in exchange for some sort of buff to enhance the RPG aspects of the game, but Wild Wasteland has no such debuffs, making it a very solid choice if you don't like any of the other options. Patrolling the Mojave. This is an iconic quote uttered by just about every NCR NPC in the entire game of Fallout New Vegas, basically their default line when they have nothing else to say.
Patrolling the Mojave almost makes you wish for a nuclear winter.
It's been spammed so much it reached the meme status of other similar lines of Bethesda titles, such as Arrow to the Knee from Skyrim. Fallout 2 Enclave Communications Officer. This unnamed guy is the best NPC in the history of Fallout, and I will die on that hill. This guy is hilarious. He has more personality than almost any character from any of the mainline Bethesda games. Hell, even more than any Fallout New Vegas or Fallout 1 character. Amazing voice acting from this guy. It literally just sounds like you're talking to a real person.
Enclave here. Why isn't your video feed working? Who the hell is this? Try the gain. Well, your unit still doesn't appear to be operational, pal. Who is this? Ain't it the truth? Just don't let anyone who's got the president's ear hear that. You'll be making cattle runs to New Reno till the end of time, pal. Yeah, you know how unhappy he gets when people complain. He takes it personal, like it's a loyalty thing. Maybe that just goes with being the President of the United States, or what's left of him. The President of the United States of America. Who do you think I was talking about? The fuck? Who is it? What? I should kick your fucking ass. Who is this? Oh, you white. wise guy, huh? Look, I'm tracing you right now, pal. We'll see how smart you feel with internal security all over your freaking ass, kid.
All this and bro doesn't even get named. Classic. Getting all gold bars and dead money. Most New Vegas players know by now that there are several ways to actually escape the Sierra Madre vault with all of the gold bars, which nets you more than a hefty amount of caps for your troubles. In fact, it's one of the best methods for obtaining caps in the entire game, barring any glitches of course. The gold bars weigh a combined 1,295 pounds, at 35 pounds each for a total of 37 bars, so it was never intended for the player to be able to escape with all of them, considering the limited carry weight capacity as well as the timed explosion, which will kill you if you don't escape in time. However, players have gotten really creative in figuring out ways to get all the bars out. One of my personal favorites is using Elijah's head, which is pretty genius. Just kill him, spoiler alert, take his head or any limb, put the bars in it, then carry it around to the exit. You can also just sneak past him with the bars using a stealth boy and trap him in the vault forever to earn the achievement while getting out with all of the gold, as he isn't alerted until you are already making your way towards the exit, giving you enough time to escape before your collar explodes. Joshua Graham. I'm not really trying to make a habit of just putting characters in general on this iceberg, but I thought I'd make an exception for Joshua Graham, considering just how popular he's become as of late, honestly transcending the game completely and overshadowing almost every other known character in the game. Now he's one of those motivational AI speakers you see on YouTube Shorts and TikToks. Thanks no doubt to the many great video essays analyzing why he's such a unique and compelling character. Also, you know, he's just really cool with a great design and an awesome sounding voice. That definitely helps too.
He's a butcher. Believe me, I know the godless fire that burns in his heart. I've been burned by it myself.
New Vegas has no essential NPCs. Quite possibly the best feature of the entire game, no exaggeration, and a feature I think that is overlooked by a lot of fans. I mean, it's kind of crazy to think about, that you can kill any NPC in the game, including faction leaders, possible companions, quest givers, anyone. It doesn't matter. They don't go down, they aren't essential, they just die and the game keeps going. The only exception to this are children, because, well, obvious reasons, and Yes Man, which actually has a lore explanation as he is a Securitron, and if you do kill him, he can just transfer himself to another bot, making him still technically killable in a sense, you just can't get rid of him, which is needed in order to actually make the game have an ending. Because if you kill Mr. House, Caesar, and the top brass of the NCR, well, you need to have some faction to end the game with, so having Yes Man was a genius idea. This all just makes the game feel so much more real, the world so much more alive. The decisions now have actual weight and consequence. You also have so many more ways to deal with problems. You can literally just walk into Caesar's camp and shoot him, that simple. You can of course do it the normal way though, through espionage, quests, backstabbing, but the direct approaches are always available, same thing with Benny. It's that freedom of choice that makes New Vegas so special, and the fact that anyone can die at any time definitely adds to this. It's a genius concept, and I really wish Bethesda would consider doing something like this, although with how they like to write their quests and lay out their stories, I don't see it happening anytime soon. I mean, it's obviously a really hard thing to do. You kind of have to plan it all out to work this way from the very beginning. I mean, even the original Fallouts 1 and 2 had a few invincible characters, or instances in which if a character died you would fail a mission. Or they could go back to what they did with Morrowind, where they warn you of the consequences of your actions in negating certain quests, but the way New Vegas handles it is just brilliant. I know I'm glazing this game, get ready for a lot of that in this video, but I don't think there's any game I know of that has a system anything like this, and it's one of the reasons it's so great and replayable even today. Recurring characters. So for games taking place in post-apocalyptic America over the course of many years and in vastly different wastelands, you'd think there wouldn't be that many returning faces, especially considering a lot of the characters can be killed during their respective games. But there's actually quite a few recurring characters across multiple games. One of the most well-known is the ghoul Harold, who appears in 5 different games, making him one of the most notable examples, having appeared in Fallout 1, 2, 3, Tactics, and Brotherhood of Steel. steel. He is a ghoul exposed to FEV that slowly over the course of the series, mainly Fallout 2 and 3, turns into a tree which becomes the subject of a cult that worships him known as the Tree Minders. There is also the super mutant Marcus that appears in both Fallout 2 as a companion and also in New Vegas as the leader of the community of Jacobstown. Then who could forget the mysterious stranger who appears in basically every game, but is not really a traditional character. He appears as a man wearing a trench coat that only spawns with the use of a perk in which he will randomly help you throughout your journey using his revolver. Then there's Dogmeat, who also basically appears in most of the games, usually as a companion, although he is not present in Fallout New Vegas, but yeah, it's definitely not the same dog every time, just the name gets reused as a reference to previous entries most likely. But there will be some theories down the line in regards to how it could actually be one dog. Then there's the big Brotherhood robot boss, Liberty Primm, featured in both Fallout 3 and 4, as well as the Elder of Fallout 4's Brotherhood of Steel chapter, Arthur Maxson, who appears as a child in Fallout 3, making him only about 20 years old when Fallout 4 takes place, which, yikes, that's a rough 20, my guy. But yeah, there's a few more examples, but these are some of the more noteworthy, I think, except for one specific one I left out for its own entry later down the line. Fallout 76 launch. What can be said about this, other than one of the most infamous and terrible launches of any game in history, rivaled only maybe by the launch of Cyberpunk 2077, but even then I don't think it really compares. People have made full-length documentaries talking about the many controversies, glitches, game-breaking exploits, and other strange occurrences that happened during the fateful launch back in October of 2018. Like, I seriously can't do it justice. Watch The Fall of 76, or any of the other videos delving into all the f***ups of Bethesda during this launch. It's quite impressive and astounding still to this day, to be honest, but some of the greatest hits are 50GB day one patch, more bugs than any Bethesda release prior. In fact, it even included Fallout 4 bugs, countless server issues, crashes, still has FPS problems to this day, people losing progress, people logging into other people's accounts, Bethesda accidentally doxing people, Bethesda banning people that discovered the dev room, did duplication glitches, invincibility glitches, invisibility glitches, and then asked people to write essays to get unbanned. There's the refund crisis, class action lawsuits, Power Armor Edition debacle. They tried to give people that bought these expensive editions 500 atomic points as compensation. Speaking of the scammy microtransactions, the Atomic Shop. Should I even keep going? No, just watch The Fall of 76. Fallout 1 bad ending. Just like all the other Fallout games, Fallout 1 has a few different choices in regards to its ending, which changed the slideshow at the end of the game based on your decisions, including an ending which was meant to trigger if you destroy the military base before the cathedral. However, due to a bug, the only ending that plays is the default ending, which is meant to occur when you destroy the cathedral first. However, there is another ending if you choose to side with the Master, or if you fail to complete the game in 500 days, in which, disturbingly, your player character, the Vault Dweller, is taken and forcibly thrown into an FEV vat to make you into a super mutant, while the residents of Vault 13 are slaughtered by super mutants. Fallout Shelter. Fallout Shelter is a mobile game released in 2015, which is a construction and management simulator in which you make a vault and manage it as the overseer, taking in new dwellers and making them do tasks, all while expanding your vault. The game also came under fire for its controversial microtransactions, and Bethesda even sued Warner Bros. For making a Westworld mobile game similar to Fallout Shelter in 2018, which led to the game being removed from online storefronts. Today, Fallout Shelter stands with mixed reviews, and it has even since received a board game adaptation. I frankly never really got into it, but I remember back in the day a few of my friends really did, and apparently it won a Golden Joystick Award for Best Mobile Game at some point, so maybe it is actually pretty good. Voice acted names in Fallout 4. So this is another thing that Todd Howard talked about before the release of Fallout 4, as the robot companion Codsworth in the introduction of the game calls the player's name, and they recorded thousands of names for this, including some of the most common female and male names at the time, so it's likely you can hear your real name in-game if you select it. They also included some notable troll names such as Fuckface, Boobies, and Wigglesworth, for whatever reason.
I have my moments.
Mr. Fuckface, Sean has been changed, but
New Vegas cut content and development time. I already briefly touched on this, but New Vegas had one of the shortest development cycles I've ever personally heard of for such an in-depth RPG, and definitely the shortest of any Fallout title, at least any mainline one. And even still, in my opinion at least, it's easily the best Fallout game. Now, to be fair, while a lot of that is due to the talent of Obsidian, no doubt about that, a lot of it is also owed to the work of Bethesda in creating that original engine that they utilized. Without that, it would have been impossible to make this game in that time frame. Now, because they had only 18 months, there is so much cut content with this game, it's actually insane. And I would even make a video on it, but many people have already done it, and there is just so much it would probably be longer than this entire Iceberg itself. Check out these videos if you want to learn more about all of that, but let's just say this game, which is considered one of the greatest of all time, could have been even better, which just goes to show one thing. It's not always that game devs don't have enough time, and that's a valid excuse for why a game is bad. Sometimes it is, but sometimes the passion and vision can outshine even a rushed development. That much is true with New Vegas, but also games like Halo 2 and even KOTOR 2, and I'm sure there's plenty of other examples. Still, New Vegas was planned to be much bigger, but not only did they not have enough time, but also not enough resources with the consoles they were working with. I mean, just look at some of those old dev videos. New Vegas itself, the strip, was going to be much bigger, with more NPCs and none of those annoying gates you have to go through. It was all meant to just be one big location, not to mention all the cut quests, items, and characters as well. Also, there is going to be more cut content featured on this Iceberg, but I saved some of the more interesting for their own entries. Zetans. So aliens have always been a thing in Fallout ever since the first one, where a UFO can be encountered in the wasteland. However, Fallout 3 really took it up a notch with the Zetans, a group of extraterrestrial aliens hailing from a mothership called Zeta, which is prominently featured in one of Fallout 3's goofier DLCs titled Mothership Zeta, which sees the lone wanderer being abducted by these aliens and being taken onto the ship, only for you to have to fight your way out and escape. It's pretty insane, to be honest, and quite jarring tonally, but we can't pretend New Vegas and the other games don't have their own goofy moments like this. I mean, just look at Old World Blues or any of the references found in Fallout 2. The games have their funnier sides, but this one is pretty wild. Cryptids. Another sort of goofy aspect of the Fallout world are the cryptids, which, you know, I'm all about those, even in the Fallout world, which are more prominently featured in Fallout 76, as it takes place in Appalachia, a place with many infamous cryptids and mythological creatures, which made the cut as enemies in the game, including Mothman, Wendigos, the Jersey Devil, Grafton Monster, Flatwoods Monster, Sheepsquatch, and the Blue Devil. Institute Gorillas. You might notice when you first enter the Institute in Fallout 4 that there are gorillas that are completely modeled and functional NPCs which can't be found anywhere else in the Wasteland as far as I know, except for Nuka World and as part of your settlement with the Wasteland Workshop add-on through the use of cages. But hilariously enough, they can even be released to cause havoc on the Institute, even though the ones found in the Institute are supposed to be fully synthetic, whereas the ones found in Nuka World are actually real gorillas, I'm pretty sure. War never changes. War never changes is essentially the catchphrase of the series, as it's a quote that appears in most of the games, narrated by the iconic Ron Perlman, starting with the first title, and even appearing in the last episode of Season 1 of the show.
War. War never changes. War. War never changes.
War. War never changes.
War. War never changes. When a
War. War never changes. It's that war. War never changes.
And war, well, war never changes.
Inspired by Mad Max. The Mad Max inspirations in Fallout are pretty clear, especially in the first game, mostly the Wasteland setting, which was also inspired by another game called Wasteland, but we'll get to that a little bit later. But also Mad Max 2 features the titular Max, as well as his disparagingly named dog called just Dog, similar to Fallout's dog meat. There's also plenty of clear homages and references throughout the games in general. Gek. The Gek is two different things. In universe, it's created by Vault-Tec and is known as the Garden of Eden Creation Kit, and contains materials needed to create a post-nuclear war settlement and community, which included a cold fusion reactor, as well as chemical stabilizers, water purifiers, and other necessities. Shady Sands, one of the most important settlements in the Fallout universe, was actually established through the use of a Gek, and it is also needed to make Project Purity work in Fallout 3, where the Lone Wanderer is actually tasked with securing one in the quest, finding the Garden of Eden. However, it is also the name of a tool used in modding New Vegas and Fallout 3, which led to the extensive modding history behind the games, and is why you can find an almost infinite amount of modded quests, locations, and more for Fallout 3, but especially New Vegas. Skyrim with guns. Sort of a memed thing to say, which didn't actually originate from Fallout, but rather from a machinima review of Far Cry 3, hilariously enough. However, unironically, it is a perfect way to describe Fallout 4. Why? Because it's not about role-playing or really character building or anything like that, it's about dungeon crawling. That's what most of this game consists of, looting and shooting and clearing dungeons, just like Skyrim. So many dungeons. Like, bro, I played some New Vegas again prior to making this, and there is nowhere near this many in that game, not even close, and that's a good thing. Somewhere along the line, Bethesda forgot Fallout was supposed to be a role-playing game first, shooter game second, a criticism a lot of people even levied at Skyrim, even when it was almost universally praised back in the day, but they really took it to the next level with Fallout 4. And I know a lot of people still like the game, and it was a lot of people's first Fallout and everything as well, so I'm gonna try to at least somewhat not hate on it this whole video, but yeah, I just kind of had to say my piece on that. Bugs and glitches. Had to include this as an entry because it's so well known and actually unironically a feature of these games, at least in all of the FPS games, especially Fallout 4 and 76, but not even Fallout 3 or New Vegas are safe, as I'm sure we're all aware by now. Like, it was a meme to say Skyrim, Oblivion, and Fallout New Vegas and Fallout 3 were glitchy, but seriously, those games run great compared to 76 and Fallout 4. There's just something so janky about that Fallout 4 engine. I don't know what it is, it just feels kind of wrong, whereas Fallout 3 just works, as Todd would say, for the most part at least. Everything kind of just flows. And yes, I'm playing it on PC years later, not the console releases, but after minimal modding, it works pretty great. Whereas even with mods, Fallout 4 is pretty finicky, and don't even get me started on Fallout 76. I mean, what can I even add to that conversation? We all know about it by now. Just go watch these videos if you want to see how bad it can really get. Tier 2. New Vegas 2. New Vegas 2 is the rumored sequel of the classic Fallout title, with nothing more than pure hopium and copium keeping the dream alive. But also, like a few people on Reddit have suggested, it wasn't really the setting that made New Vegas a masterpiece. Sure, it's a part of why it's cool, but if anything, it has the least amount to do with its success. Rather, it was the talent at Obsidian, specifically the writing staff, some of which came from Black Isle Studios and worked on Fallout 2. Two of those prominent people being Josh Sawyer and Chris Avallone. However, there was a ton of other talented creators and writers involved as well that made the game what it is today, and in that short development window I might add. However, Obsidian is not even the same company that it was back then, and not a ton of people from New Vegas are even still there. That's evidenced by the fact that The Outer Worlds was made. Not to really bash on that game too much, because I haven't even really played it enough to really review it, but I did play it a bit, and let me tell you, it's nothing like New Vegas. Still, getting back on track here, there's been a bunch of alleged leaks of a New Vegas 2 being in the works over the years, but none of them have been substantiated. However, there is a fan-made remake being created in Fallout 4 called Fallout 4 New Vegas, using that engine, which looks promising, although I'm unsure if this is ever really going to fully release. Regardless, don't expect a real New Vegas 2 anytime soon, but if it did happen, I'm not gonna pretend I wouldn't be hyped. But knowing what we know lore-wise from the TV show, really only dampened the rare chance of this actually happening. Psychers. Psychers are a group of interesting characters in the Fallout universe, with the term seemingly being borrowed from the Warhammer series, as they are a group of individuals found in the games, which have some sort of psychic ability or precognition regarding future events. I'm not even gonna lie, these seemingly supernatural abilities seem a little out of place in the world of Fallout, given how much of it is somewhat grounded. Although, let's be real, a lot of the lore in these games are pretty over the top anyway. I mean, Mothman is canon, for Christ's sake. There are 4 Psychers in Fallout 1, which are experimental test subjects of the Master, who himself had psychic abilities as well, and bestowed some of his powers onto Wiggum, Gideon, Lucy, and more. However, there are other psychics found in basically all of the other entries. You've got Mama Murphy, the chem addict from Fallout 4, Hakunin, the Arroyo Shaman from Fallout 2, Bloomseer Poplar from Fallout 3, and even New Vegas has a child named the Forecaster that has visions of the future and has to wear a device called the Psychic Nullifier to stop the headaches that come from his abilities. The Master is voiced by Winnie the Pooh. This is a pretty well-known fact by now, but still an interesting tidbit. Somehow these characters were voiced by the same voice actor, Jim Cummings. I guess it just goes to show the talent of this man, especially considering the sheer amount of voice roles he's done over the years. So much so, in fact, that he reportedly even forgot voicing the Master, despite him being such a unique presence in the Fallout games.
The Unity will bring about the Master race.
Master!
One able to survive, or even
Thrive!
in the wasteland. As long as there are differences, we will tear ourselves apart fighting each other. We need one race.
Race!
One goal.
Goal!
One people to move forward to our destiny.
Fallout Tactics: Brotherhood of Steel. One of the more obscure Fallout titles, it was developed by Australian developer Microforte and released only on Windows in March of 2001, with the game following a squad from the Brotherhood of Steel that is sent on various missions. The game more so focusing on its turn-based strategy gameplay rather than role-playing or dialogue elements. This was also the first Fallout title to feature a multiplayer mode, interestingly enough, where you can set up your own squad and then battle. It's also fascinating that not only can you play as a human, but also as a super mutant, ghoul, dog, robot, or even a Deathclaw. Despite the game being so different from the others, it actually has some decent reviews on Steam and even an 82 on Metacritic, although as we found out, you can't always trust those scores. A Slave Obeys Challenge. This is a cool one to include because I did talk about BioShock being up there as one of my favorite games of all time alongside New Vegas. So it's pretty neat seeing this little reference in one of the game's GRA challenges, which is titled A Slave Obeys, and it's completed by killing Mr. House with a golf club. Sound familiar? Yeah, those who played BioShock, you know what I'm talking about here. Eyes on the Prize Achievement. Okay, so this is one I just had to throw in here because while I was making the Iceberg and writing for this video, I was also finishing up all the achievements for Fallout 4, and I came across this insane one called Eyes on the Prize from the Nuka World DLC. Now, there are a few tougher achievements in the Fallout games. You know, you have the level 3 GRA challenges in New Vegas, but for the most part that game is pretty easy achievement-wise, just kind of time-consuming because you have to play all the DLCs and complete the game with all endings. However, this one, the way they intended for it to be done was just torture, as you have to get 100,000 Nuka-Cade tickets by playing these tedious arcade games, which if you play good and legitly, only give about 1,000 tickets, and I was not about to play the shooting gallery 100 times. So I looked up a tutorial, shout out to Sweet Jarl by the way for this, and look at what you have to do to speed this up. It's both genius and hilarious. In Shining Armor Bug. On the surface, this New Vegas perk sounds pretty broken, in a good way I mean. Its description reads, quote, beams reflect off the mirror-like finish of your gleaming armor. You gain an additional +5 damage threshold against energy weapons while wearing any metal armor, +2 while wearing reflective eyewear. It was included as part of the Dead Money DLC and could even be acquired as low as level 1, although it's not really possible because you need 70 science and 20 repair, but that's not why we're talking about it. We're talking about it because unfortunately the perk actually does nothing and is completely bugged. It had to be fixed in various fan patches because of the way the perk is labeled in its string of code, which is to add damage threshold when the enemy is using weapon class energy instead of what it is actually supposed to say, which is energy weapons. Whoops. Plunger Room. I always like these weird unmarked locations in the Fallout games. Got another one for New Vegas coming up later in this tier, but for now we have the shelter found in the top left of the Capital Wasteland of Fallout 3, also known as the Plunger Room, because, well, there's 49 plungers to be found in the shelter for whatever reason. There's also a bunch of strange sculptures made out of random junk, ruined statues, and even bloody handprints everywhere. There's even a guy made out of plungers with a motorcycle helmet for a head laying on a gurney. What does it all mean? Who knows? Fallout Brotherhood of Steel. Not to be confused with Fallout Tactics Brotherhood of Steel, this one is just plain old Brotherhood of Steel, and is one of the stranger Fallout titles, and probably the most hated of all of them. Not even Todd Howard would defend this game. It released in 2004 for the Xbox and PS2, and is off the bat really weird, as it's not an open world experience, rather it's a linear game where you travel from area to area without being able to backtrack. You can initially only choose one of 3 characters before eventually unlocking 6 unique ones, which all have different special stats. So I mean, at least that makes an appearance. There's Rhombus, a paladin, Kane, a ghoul, Nadia, a heavy weapons wielder, Patty, who specializes in medical assistance and dual wielding, Cyrus, who has good movement options but can't fire while running, I guess. And then there's the Chad Vault Dweller from Fallout 1, who can use all weapons but is only available after meeting him for the first time in-game. The game consists of our Brotherhood initiates fighting against wasteland creatures and super mutants in an attempt to take down a super mutant army led by General Addis. The gameplay is, well, strange. It's a top-down shooter slash beat-em-up, I guess, with puzzle and platforming elements. Definitely doesn't fit in with the other games, that's for sure. Who is Mr. New Vegas? Everyone knows Mr. New Vegas is the most iconic and best radio host in all of Fallout, well, at least in New Vegas. However, he is a little more mysterious than hosts like 3Dog from Fallout 3 or Travis Miles from 4, because he doesn't actually appear physically in the game, so Who is he? I mean, he does comment on various actions of the player throughout their playthrough. He's also voiced by Wayne Newton, who is known as the real-life Mr. Las Vegas, but in the game he is not a real person. He's actually an AI DJ created by Mr. House before even the Great War, and still continues to be the host of Radio New Vegas, even hundreds of years after the apocalypse. Brahmin tipping. Just like the urban legend of cow tipping in real life, you can tip over Brahmins in most of the Fallout titles, such as 1, 2, 3, New Vegas, and even Tactics. I didn't even know this was a thing in 3 or New Vegas, I'm not gonna lie. You just have to crouch next to a Brahmin and press the activate button, which will cause them to ragdoll before getting back up. You can even do this in Fallout 3 until the Brahmin dies, at which point you won't even lose karma. And yes, I said urban legend in the beginning because I also didn't know until researching this, but apparently cow tipping isn't even a real thing in real life because cows don't sleep standing up and are easily disturbed from sleep, so you can't really just push them over like that. I mean, now that I'm thinking about it, it makes a lot of sense honestly, but I guess barnyard just rotted my brain. Food paste. Food paste is a strange consumable item found in Fallout 4, which was made as a food substitute as part of a Vault-Tec experiment, which ended up causing strange effects in its users, making them aggressive and causing their skin to turn pink, which is why there are pink feral ghouls. No romance in New Vegas. While there are sleeping partners, people you can have sex with in Fallout New Vegas, sometimes related to the story and a part of the role-playing experience, you might say, when using certain perks, there is no standard RPG romance system like there is in Fallout 4 or Skyrim. You can't just romance the companions or other characters by doing their quests, but you can sleep with certain characters like Benny in order to kill him easily, or a few other partners throughout the game, which honestly I think works better than having long-term relationships with people in the wasteland while you're busy running around killing Deathclaws and fighting in a war against the Legion, the NCR, or both. But for some, the feature is missed, I guess, although I think there are much more important features which 4 was missing and were needed more than romance options, but that might just be me, who knows. Cafe of Broken Dreams. This is another special encounter that can be seen in Fallout 2, which is a reference to the Boulevard of Broken Dreams painting, as well as Mad Max 2 The Road Warrior, as you can find Dogmeat as a companion here, but if you happen to attack Dogmeat, then a man resembling Max will spawn in and attack you. Vault Boy in Smash Bros. I was actually surprised by this one. Apparently Vault Boy appears in Smash Bros. Ultimate as a DLC costume for the Meat Gunner, which is pretty cool. Not much to say about it, just a cool addition. Area 51. Area 51 is an unseen location in the original Fallout that is only mentioned. However, it was meant to actually appear in Fallout 2 before it was cut. It's clear from the alien ship encounter in Fallout, though, that it probably houses UFOs and possibly aliens/Zetans. Bill Calhoun. Bill Calhoun is an initially unnamed character in Fallout New Vegas who was only given his real name in the Honest Hearts DLC. Originally, he's just described as a member of the Followers of the Apocalypse alongside the Burned Man, Joshua Graham, and Edward Sallow, the man who would go on to become Caesar. Both Edward and Bill were sent by the Followers to study the tribes near the Grand Canyon, which is where they met Joshua, who was a Mormon missionary. They then traveled to Arizona and met up with the Blackfoot tribe, where they ended up being captured, only for Edward to conquer the tribe and create the Legion, making Joshua his right-hand man. Calhoun did not approve of the violence being done by the Legion and protested against it, and in a strange turn of mercy, Caesar let Calhoun live and return to the Followers. He is never seen in the game, and his only depiction can be seen on one side of the Legion coin, the Silver Denarius. Federation Crash Site. Here we have a special encounter which can be found in Fallout 2. It is a reference to Star Trek, as the crashed shuttle is similar to one found in the show. There was also a pistol called the Phaser, another Star Trek reference which was meant to be found here before it ended up being cut. Kellogg is hiding in Nick's head. Like many people have pointed out by now, it's weird that this is something that's completely dropped and only comes up once in the whole game during the whole memory den thing. When Nick has to get hooked up to that machine, we see Kellogg briefly invade Nick's mind, but he never completely takes over or anything, which makes me think maybe something bigger was planned for this. It would have been kind of interesting if Kellogg and Nick ended up sharing a brain, kind of like a Johnny Silverhand type of dynamic. Could have been interesting, at least more so than the generic villain Kellogg that we got. They tried to give him some backstory through the whole memory thing, but come on, that was just lazy, like it's just pure exposition. Let us experience his story through Nick. That would have been way cooler in my opinion.
Hey, Valentine.
Hope you got what you were looking for inside my head. I was right. I should have killed you when you were on ice.
You want to try for round 2? Let's go!
What? What are you talking about?
Wait. Were you just playing a joke on me?
I guess that's for you to wonder and for me and Kellogg's memories to know for sure. Anyway, I feel fine, so let's get going. Or I could head back to Diamond City, since you've got company already.
Private Kowalski. So many interesting interactions and characters in New Vegas, and despite this being very well known, I had no idea about this character for the longest time. Just goes to show how many small interactions there are in this game. Basically, in Boulder City, you can come across an NCR private named Kowalski observing a memorial to NCR soldiers that died during the first battle of Hoover Dam. You can talk to him about it, but what's really interesting is if you desecrate the memorial by shooting it, Kowalski will run up to you and...
What the f*** are you doing? My brother died at the Battle of Hoover Dam. You're desecrating a war memorial.
You can actually make a fun game out of this, which many people have done already, which is to shoot the memorial and then start running because Kowalski will literally chase you across the entire Mojave as you try to play the game. That includes the Strip, Deathclaw territory, anywhere but the final battle, and the DLC as far as I know. Makes for a bit of a fun survival horror experience, as he can be waiting around any corner, silently stalking and waiting to strike. Just when you think he's gone, and then...
Oh shit! Ah! It's Kowalski! Oh no! He followed me. He followed me all the way to...
Fallout 1 and 2 time limits. I briefly touched on this with Fallout 1, but yes, both the original games had time limits, in regards to how fast you have to beat the game as a win condition or else you just lose. In the first one you have about 150 in-game days to acquire the water chip or else the game ends. However, this isn't the actual end of the game, and after this I believe you don't have to worry about the timer anymore, but either way it was patched in later versions because some players found this annoying, which is also why Fallout 2's time limit is almost a non-factor, as it takes 13 in-game years for the game to just end, leaving you plenty of time to mess around without having to worry about completing it with a time crunch. Vault Boy's thumb. So the origins of Vault Boy's iconic thumb pose have had some speculation over the years, not that it's that important in the grand scheme of things, but many people believe that the reason he holds his thumb up like that is not just some generic pose of approval, but rather as a way of measuring how big a mushroom cloud is, as if it's bigger than your thumb then you are not safe from the radiation and should immediately evacuate. This notion though was seemingly disproved by the artists that originally created the Vault Boy design. However, when the Fallout show dropped, they kind of proved and disproved it again, as in the first episode, Cooper Howard, the guy that would go on to model for Vault-Tec and act as Vault Boy, would show his daughter the thumb technique right before the bombs dropped. However, when he was actually doing the Vault-Tec commercial, it just seems more like a random spur-of-the-moment decision. The Far Beyond. This is a location referenced but never seen during the quest Come Fly With Me, the mysterious place that Jason Bright and his Bright Brotherhood of Ghouls seek to travel to. as he saw it as a radioactive utopia where the ghouls can heal and be safe from the perils of the wasteland, which the player can help send them to after dealing with the Nightkin, the other ghouls, and Chris Haversam, the fake ghoul. There are so many other possible directions this quest can go. You can even make their rockets explode for no reason. Well, I guess if you hate ghouls, I mean, that's a reason. Apparently they really did make it to somewhere though, because in certain endings, members of the Bright Brotherhood can return to help defend Novak after the Battle of Hoover Dam at the end of the game. Fake Vault 13. Fake Vault 13 is a unique location found in Fallout 2, which can be learned about from an NPC named Merc by buying a holotape off him, which reveals the location of this cave, which is interestingly an unfinished vault, as you can find construction signs, as well as the fact that it has a similar layout to the real Vault 13 found in Fallout 1. The Brotherhood of Steel inspired by the Knights Templar. This is a pretty basic one, but I saw it on a few lists and thought I might as well include it, but yes, it appears the Brotherhood were definitely inspired by religious orders, and specifically the Templars, based on their suspicions of everyone else, distaste for outsiders, somewhat of a wholly unifying goal, as well as having the ranks of squires, knights, and elders. Even their symbols are similar, although obviously they have their differences. Even the Brotherhood itself isn't very consistent throughout all the games, mostly differing based on location, as the West Coast Brotherhood is more reclusive and afraid of outsiders, while the East Coast Brotherhood is more involved in the politics of the wasteland and showing their power. The Primm in Fallout 4 is the ultimate example of this. However, as we see in the Fallout show, it seems this version of the Brotherhood has even spread to the West Coast. So it seems this is just the current interpretation of the Brotherhood as a whole, at least under Bethesda's direction. Deathclaw Promontory. This is that unmarked location in New Vegas, which is still pretty well known, not only because it's one of the most dangerous spots in the whole game, but also because it has the best armor in the whole game hidden there, the Remnant's power armor. It's one of the only locations in the game to be on the east side of the Colorado River, and is notorious for housing a huge pack of Deathclaws, meaning you want to be pretty high level with some pretty good gear before trying to take them on and get the armor. Although trust me, it's definitely worth it. Interplay's Fallout 3 Van Buren. This was the second iteration of Fallout 3, which was being developed by Black Isle Studios, which was under the codename of Van Buren, until it ended up being cancelled in December of 2003. The development behind this game is pretty interesting, as a lot of details ended up actually being reused in Fallout New Vegas, and the game even got far enough into development to receive a tech demo, which can still be downloaded and played today. The game was going to utilize an engine called the Jefferson engine, and would have been a hybrid of real-time action and the turn-based combat of classic Fallout. The game was also planned to include co-op, as well as different playable races, such as ghouls and super mutants, which, Todd Howard, if you're listening, is something we desperately need in Fallout 5. The game's story was pretty similar though to New Vegas, at least in terms of some of its major conflicts, as it would have taken place in the New California Republic, and would have featured the Brotherhood of Steel, Caesar's Legion, and many more cut factions, as well as even Joshua Graham as a companion. The game interestingly would have started in a similar way to the Elder Scrolls games, with the player being a prisoner that escaped. Whether they were falsely imprisoned or not was up to player choice. The main story was very different from New Vegas, however, as it was planned to be about a mad scientist named Presper, who intended to use something called Odysseus, an advanced AI, to launch ballistic missiles to the surface in order to clear the abominations that inhabit the wastes. Overall though, the game sounds and looked very interesting, and it's sad that it never got finished, but at the same time, if it did, we never would have gotten Fallout 3 or New Vegas. Tier 3. Basin Creek Building is Obsidian HQ. The Basin Creek building is at first glance a random location in New Vegas that isn't that noteworthy. It's just a building found near the West Pump Station and Allied Technologies offices. The place is infested with giant ants and radroaches, but most interesting is that the building was modeled after the Obsidian office at the time, and there's even a bunch of Easter eggs related to real things that happened at the office, such as it having an ant infestation, a rat dying inside the walls, instance, someone punching a hole in the bathroom, a car crashing into the building, the bathroom flooding, and even more. Fallout 4 wasn't going to have a female protagonist. Somehow this one wouldn't surprise me, not because it makes sense or anything, but because of how much Bethesda takes away from the player in terms of actually role-playing in a role-playing game, and the ability to just make your own story and your own character. It's all kind of just predetermined in Fallout 4. You have a son, you have a wife or a husband, you have a backstory either as a lawyer or as a war vet, and it seems a lot of aspects of the game were designed around you choosing the male protagonist. Like for example, the power armor you use so early on in the game. In previous Bethesda titles and even New Vegas, you needed power armor training to actually use the armor, whereas Nate knows how to use it immediately, because he would have had experience with it fighting in the war, whereas Nora likely would not have had the same experience. There are a few more examples, and it was even rumored in alleged leaks that this was going to be the case before the game was released, and it's like, why does Bethesda do these things? They really gotta take a step back with Fallout 5 and write a minimal plot outline without contradicting people's own characters. The point of a role-playing game is to craft your own character, choose your gender, your backstory, your build, everything. It seems they kind of learned this lesson with 76 and Starfield. At least the protagonist isn't voiced in either of these games, thankfully. So I have some hope that if Fallout 5 ever does come out, Bethesda will hopefully give us some more RPG options in our RPG. That's really all I ask. 1884 Vault-Tec. They also had a number for the Amazon TV show, I'm pretty sure, but this one here is a number found in Fallout 4 on a calendar, which no longer works today, but if you called it back when the game released, you were met with this message.
Thank you for calling Vault-Tec, your first choice in post-nuclear survival. We're sorry, but due to unexpectedly high call volume, all representatives are currently busy. Please stay on the line, and someone will be with you as soon as possible. There are 101 million callers in front of you. Estimated wait time 78,643 hours. Thank you for calling Vault-Tec. Have a wonderful day.
Dinosaur footprint. Here we have another special encounter from Fallout 1. There is a giant footprint which can be found, but only one and no other tracks around, and no way of figuring out what the print belongs to. Although creator Tim Kaine said in a conference that they plan to involve time traveling and dinosaurs into the game, so they left the footprint in as a reference to that. Dead Money, Bad Ending. Even as a big fan of Dead Money, which is probably one of the most disliked New Vegas DLCs, I didn't actually know about this secret bad ending, which is a really cool addition in my opinion. Before you start the DLC, you have to talk to Veronica and ask her about Father Elijah, then play through it normally until you reach the vault and tell him about Veronica, at which point he decides to wipe out the entire Mojave, including the Brotherhood chapter and the NCR. A very similar plan to what we talked about with Van Buren. Agree to join him and the game will end right there, with you completely destroying the Mojave, ending not just the DLC but the whole game. Kind of a hilariously evil ending, but always happy to have more options.
Perhaps I was too quick to put a collar on a potential ally. Very well, I'll come down and show you what the Sierra Madre has in store.
In the years that followed, the legend of the Sierra Madre faded, and there were no new visitors to the city. Years later, when a mysterious blood-red cloud began to roll across the Mojave, then west toward the Republic, no one knew where it had come from. Only that it brought death in its wake. Attempts to find the source of the toxic cloud failed. The Mojave was cut off. Through the cloud, lights were seen from Helios 1. There were stories of ghosts immune to gunfire who struck down anyone they saw with rays of light. The last chapter of the Mojave came when a modified Repcon rocket struck Hoover Dam, releasing a blood-red cloud, killing all stationed there. All attempts to penetrate the cloud and retake the dam failed,
and both the NCR and Legion finally turned away from it, citing the place as cursed. In the years that followed, the legend of the Sierra Madre faded, and there were no new visitors to the city. Only 2 remained alive in the depths of the cloud at the Sierra Madre, waiting for their new world to begin again.
Playing Fallout 3 as a baby. Gotta just say right here, rest in peace to Mitten Squad. He was one of the best Fallout content creators in the game, and pretty much one of the only ones I actually watched consistently, because his playthroughs and challenge runs were not only creative, but fucking hilarious. My favorite of these being trying to beat Fallout 3 without moving the camera, which on its own sounds like an almost impossible challenge, and that's before you find out you have to escape the vault as a baby by clipping out of it before you actually grow up, which actually works, making you a tiny version of your character, the lone wanderer, running around in the wasteland. It's hilarious. New Vegas Cemetery Whispers. A creepy little known fact about New Vegas, sometimes when you're at one of these cemeteries at night, whether it be in Good Springs or Camp Forlorn Hope or anywhere where there's actual graves, you can hear voices, whispers in the dark, likely the ghosts of the deceased inhabitants. Fallout 3 Numbers Station. This is a notorious Fallout 3 creepypasta, one of the most well-known from the game, which claims that there is a cryptic radio station which predicts future events through the use of coded beeps, which is similar to how real-life number stations have been used. The messages here are supposedly in Morse code and can be heard in certain areas of high elevation in the map, such as around Raven Rock, by the SATCOM arrays, or at the top of the Ferris wheel in Point Lookout, or even sometimes at Tenpenny Tower. Some of these cryptic messages include, "I can't believe Britney's actually won an Oscar," and "I can't believe they've actually done it, not long left, the noise, I can't take the noise anymore, I have a pistol in the attic," or the one that led a lot of people to come back to this creepypasta many years later. "The Queen has died today. The world mourns, as on days like this, we are all Brits." Vault Zero. This is an interesting location found in Fallout Tactics, also called the Calculator's Lair, which is found on Cheyenne Mountain, and was created as the so-called nucleus of the Vault network, being the largest of all the vaults and not housing any sort of experiment. Similar though to what we had with Buds in the TV show, slight spoilers here, there was a system in place to cryogenically freeze people pre-war, connecting them to a giant supercomputer called the Calculator. However, by the time the player character, the warrior, makes it to the vault, the Calculator, as well as the pre-war inhabitants, have become hostile, crazed, and insane, killing anything in sight. Irvine. Irvine is another location, a city from the New California Republic. It is not well known due to it being cut from the first Fallout and only being mentioned once in New Vegas. Fun fact, Obsidian Entertainment was actually headquartered in Irvine, but the original concept for the location, which never came to fruition, was to have it be a sort of utopia, surrounded by large walls and controlled by a group called the Irvine Land Corporation, with no crime or poverty, patrolled and kept secure by deadly robots. However, this was all a facade, as the town was ruled by an iron fist of a supercomputer that directly controlled the robots in the city. Chinese giant robot in Fallout 4. In Fallout 4, you can find an American propaganda poster which depicts communist China as a giant war machine similar to Liberty Prime. Although this is likely just simply propaganda, as the Chinese were never shown to have any tech similar to that of Liberty Prime. Ron the Narrator. I believe I referenced this in the Out of Bounds Discoveries Iceberg, but going back even further, the narrator for most of the Fallout games has been the iconic voice of actor Ron Perlman, and New Vegas is no different, narrating the ending of the game via the slideshow, showcasing your various choices throughout your adventures in the wastes. However, what some people might not know is that he physically appears in the game as an NPC during this sequence. If you no-clip during the slideshow, you'll be able to see him just yapping away while the slideshow plays in front of him. And he's got an interesting look, wearing an eye patch and Legion armor for some reason. Although this character model is also labeled in-game as Testicles the Debug Kenturian. Fallout Exodus. Exodus is a D20 role-playing game that was developed in 2008 and was originally meant to be a part of the Fallout universe before the license was revoked and the game had to be considered its own standalone product, with all known Fallout references removed. Although it still contains the post-apocalypse theme and many common elements shared with Fallout, the overall plot is however a little different as it takes place in the year 2042 in an alternative American history where in 2012 a nuclear war broke out during the whole 2012 world-ending scare, if any of you remember that, which led to people having to hunker down in vaults just like Fallout before resurfacing from their exodus 20 years later. Iron Mountain. Here we have another obscure location that is never actually seen and only mentioned in Fallout 2, which could be one of many places in the United States. Although there is only one that is fairly close to Arroyo, its only reference can be found on the PoseidoNet terminal in Gecko's nuclear power plant, which lists it as offline. There's not much else we know about this, but it could have possibly been another cut location. Experimental plant is Nirnroot. Here we have a reference to the Elder Scrolls found in Fallout 4. It's called the Experimental Plant and can be found on the Prydwen, as well as in the wild on an island. The scribes describe it as having restorative properties, good for making tea with, and some even designate it as a quote-unquote glow leaf. However, it was originally labeled NRT0001, which along with its design is a direct reference to the consumable plant from the Elder Scrolls known as Nirnroot, although it has been denied by Bethesda directly that this means that Elder Scrolls and Fallout take place in the same universe. The Ghoul Whale. Here we have an unseen cryptid from Fallout 4, an interesting creature that cannot be encountered in the game but is still mentioned. A giant blue ghoul whale, also called Ol Peg, which is described by caravan guards in Bunker Hill, who say this about the creature.
So one day, my grandpappy was egging. It was a foul day, fog so thick you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. He was stumbling along and then he heard a tremendous clamoring from the ocean. Like nothing he'd ever heard before or since. He stood still for a long time. The fog cleared for a brief moment, and that's when he saw the outline of the great behemoth. Massive. Bigger than anything you or I will ever see. Ol Peg. A giant blue ghoul whale.
Starfield and Fallout are connected. So as we all know, Starfield was meant to be Bethesda's new IP, not connected to Fallout, Elder Scrolls, or anything. They didn't want to be shackled down by previous projects. However, some people believed it could be possible that Starfield was a sequel of sorts to Fallout, as it takes place in the 2300s, when Fallout for the most part takes place in the 2200s and before. Although it's pretty clear art direction-wise, aesthetically, and in terms of lore and world building that they can't be in the same universe, such as with the Earth not being destroyed by nukes and radiation like it is in Fallout, but rather because of the planet's magnetosphere collapsing. Camp Willow. Camp Willow is another location that is only mentioned in New Vegas and never appears. However, it seems it was planned to be included in the game, as it was included in an early map, with it appearing somewhat near the fort on the other side of the Colorado River. But after the first battle of Hoover Dam, it seems the Legion attacked and completely destroyed the camp, securing the east side of the river. Kalewacha ne Conserva O. This is a phrase said by Joshua Graham upon capturing the leader of the White Legs, Salt Upon Wounds, saying it's something he must understand, implying it's a phrase from their language, although we, the audience, never get an official answer as to what it means, leading us to have to figure it out for ourselves.
And now you stand on holy ground, a temple to God's glory on earth. The only use for an animal in our temple is sacrifice. Kale Wachane Conserva O. You understand me, don't you? Don't you?
We know, however, from interviews with Joshua Sawyer that the line is actually a translatable phrase, as the White Legs language is made up of a mix of Spanish, English, and Shoshone, which is really interesting. One of the more common interpretations is, "As God is my witness, Kale Wacha, none of you will be spared, ne conserva o." However, there are some other theories, such as simply "God will not save you," or another by Fallout lore YouTuber Synonymous that says, quote, "What are you to Kaisar? You may push or pick us off, but we will survive." Baja Ghosts. Okay, so this one likely isn't really much of anything. I mean, when Hanlon describes chasing ghosts in Baja, he's not literally referring to ghosts, but it's also not stated who or what exactly he's talking about here, which led to theories about them chasing down old Enclave Remnants members, Legion spies, or even raiders, but I don't think that it really matters a whole lot, and maybe it was all just a wild goose chase, which is why Hanlon calls them ghosts in the first place. Maybe they weren't even chasing anyone at all. However, Joshua Sawyer again stated that this was an intentional mystery, so I guess we are supposed to speculate on who Hanlon is referring to here. Cancelled Fallout movie. So long before we got the Amazon series, there were quite a few cancelled Fallout media projects, including a film from Interplay Entertainment's film division, which partnered with Dark Horse to create a movie adaptation of the game in 2000. One of these script outlines actually leaked online in 2011, written by Brett V. Friedman. It starts similarly to the TV show, with the main character living in a vault in LA that simulates the old world environment, and that's not where the similarities end. The hero's father is the overseer and was alive during the pre-war era somehow, and the water chip breaks, and it even takes place in Vault 13. Tier 4. Fallout 4 was going to be set in New York City. Originally, in its early design phase, New York was discussed in regards to the game's setting, and was even featured in an early document drafted by the head writer of Fallout 4, Emil Pagliarulo, with this in mind. Although, as we know, they eventually decided on Boston, but I still think New York could be a great location for a Fallout game, and maybe we'll get to see it in Fallout 5, who knows. Original Mr. House face. So this one kind of speaks for itself, but yeah, this was the original Mr. House design apparently, and I'm definitely glad they changed it. This guy just looks way too creepy, like some sort of Half-Life NPC, like G-Man a bit even. The current design is so much better because he appears well dressed and articulate on the surface, not just like a sleazy businessman or something. It's only if you do actually confront him that you'll find that he's nothing like how he portrays himself on the monitor. Birds in Fallout 4 are Institute spies. Here we go, we're getting into some juicier theories and mysteries. But this one isn't just a conspiracy theory, it's actually confirmed, as it is a part of the Institute's Watcher program, which is referenced by a few characters, as a way of spying on the people of the Commonwealth using synth birds. A cut terminal in the game would have actually listed the locations that these birds could be found at, labeling Good Neighbor, Diamond City, Fort Hagen, Libertalia, Covenant, Warwick Homestead, and Vault 81. Kaga. Kaga is a tribal member of the Arroyo settlement in Fallout 2, who is meant to be a major character in the game before being cut, as he would have been the Chosen One's rival throughout the game, encountering him many times throughout the Wasteland. In fact, at least a total of 5 known instances were found, in which he, as the previous Chosen One, would have tried to attack and kill the player. However, it would have been possible to kill Kaga at any of these battles, which obviously would stop him from appearing later on in the game, although you are forced to either kill him or die in the final encounter, which would have happened in San Francisco. Tool art in Fallout 1 and 2. Just a random cool fact, but in Fallout 1 and 2, you can find tool album art as posters in certain locations. Dog meat is immortal or a synth. So this is a notion, or more like a theory, explaining why dog meat can be found in many of the games, despite them taking place over the course of hundreds of years. The easiest explanation is that it's just a different dog each time with the same name. However, some have posited that it could actually be the same dog that is somehow immortal, possibly a ghoul or even an Institute synth. Although this doesn't make much sense considering Fallout 1 takes place in 2161, and while the Institute was founded before this in 2110, it doesn't seem like they had the capability of producing synths until much later on. At least that's the case with synthetic humans. But maybe it's just this dog meat that's a synth in Fallout 4 and isn't related to the other dog meats. Personally, I just think it's not that deep, and it's just a reference to the previous games. Gojira. This isn't a cut character per se, at least I don't think so. It's just an unused version of the fire gecko, a giant one which is stronger than any other enemy in the game, capable of 3200 DPS and having a massive health pool of 8000 HP. It was not actually going to appear in the game and was just a way of the devs messing around, spawning it in and watching it wreak havoc on the other NPCs. Its name is also a reference to Godzilla, and even today it can be spawned in your game using this console command. So spawn this guy in and try not to die, I guess. Jet Origins Retcon. So it seems at first glance that the origin of Jet may have been retconned in Fallout 4, as you can find it in Vault 95 along with other pre-war chems, and there's even a terminal which confirms that Jet is a pre-war drug, despite there being a character by the name of Myron who claims to have invented Jet in the 2200s. But as some on Reddit have pointed out, it may not actually be a retcon, and it's likely Myron was just lying about having created it, as there are instances in which it contradicts his story in Fallout 2 itself, such as a character named Mrs. Bishop talking about how her husband was hooked on the drug before Myron had even been born. So yeah, it seems Jet is actually a pre-war chem, or at least there was a pre-war variant of it. Lobotomites in Fallout 2. Lobotomites are some of the most prominent enemies in the Old World Blues DLC of Fallout New Vegas, and are cybernetically enhanced humans that have had their brains replaced during experimentation on Big Mountain by Dr. Mobius. They were also planned to appear in Fallout 2 early on in development, where they would ambush the player before this ended up being cut. This procedure, in case you were wondering, was an old medical procedure, sometimes used on schizophrenic people or otherwise unstable and mentally ill individuals, which would sever the connection between the frontal lobe and the rest of the brain, which would supposedly cure certain mental and neurological disorders, before it was eventually banned in the US and most countries. Fallout Tactics 2. So Fallout Tactics is already more of an obscure title, but this is even more so, as this was the cancelled sequel, which was planned for a Windows PC release and was in development by 14 Degrees and Microforte, before being cancelled in December of 2001 due to the poor performance of the first game. This planned sequel was meant to feature the Midwest Brotherhood of Steel, fighting against the Mutant Liberation Army, a faction mentioned in the first Tactics game. One of the planned enemies, which we can see in some concept art, was a mutated crocodile, which looks pretty cool. The source of the mutants would have been an irradiated gek, creating a so-called mutant garden, which the player would be tasked with destroying. Although besides that, not much else is known about this lost title. Weed in Fallout 2. Another piece of cut content from Fallout 2 was, interestingly enough, weed, and was meant to be a consumable item that would have been found at the cut location, the EPA, or Environmental Protection Agency. Rainbow Confederation. And here is another piece of Fallout 2 cut content. Seems like this game had almost as much cut content as New Vegas. This was actually quite an interesting faction which didn't make it to the final version. They were called the Rainbow Confederation, headquartered at a location called the Love Shack. They were made up of LGBT members and would attack the player unless they had been in a gay relationship. There isn't too much else known considering they were cut from the final release, but we do have some lines which were found unused in the files. And yeah, some of these are pretty wild. Slave suicide bombers in New Vegas. This is something that, as far as I know, isn't actually physically seen in New Vegas, but is very much a thing the Legion would do. You can learn about it from Ranger Andy in Novak if you ask him about his leg, to which he describes an encounter with a child who was forced to blow themselves up to try to take down the NCR with them. Extremely dark and brutal stuff.
A few years back, we get a tip that some Legion slavers were holed up in this burnt-out house a few clicks from where we were stationed. We get there and it's deserted. No sign anyone's been there. I mean, nothing. As we're leaving, I hear something behind me. I turn around and there's this kid, just skin and bone, and he's looking up at us and he's scared half to death. Been hiding in a closet. I go to grab him out of there and I notice he's holding something in his hand. Something metal. He shuts himself back in the closet and that's when I see the grenade he's left by my feet. They do it a lot, the Legion, using kids. They know we'll hesitate. Anyway, that was the first time. Second time, I fell down.
Fallout 3 was meant to happen shortly after the war. This is a theory that many fans have held over the years, not because of anything directly said by Bethesda about its development, but because Bethesda doesn't really understand how long 200 years really is, and nowhere is that more apparent than Fallout 4, even more so than Fallout 3, which has the same issues. I mean, people have delved into this with both Fallout 3 and 4 as to why a lot of these design decisions are questionable given when the games are supposed to take place. For example, in Fallout 3, everything is completely destroyed, right? Makes sense, post-apocalypse and all that. But there is barely any civilization to be found. Compare that to the West Coast in Fallout 1, which takes place over 100 years before, or even Fallout 2, and you can see much more civilization, cleaner living spaces, people trying to rebuild society, whereas the setting of the capital wasteland makes it seem as though everyone is just desperate to get by, making towns out of literal garbage next to a nuclear bomb, I might add. I mean, raiders even sleep next to dead bodies and shit. Like, I know they're supposed to be insane, but not even the fiends of New Vegas do this, except for the Vault 3 Motor Runner gang, but I guess they're just exceptionally crazy. But it goes beyond this. There are also too many remnants of the old world for it to have been so long after the bombs dropped. Like there being pre-war skeletons, no clean water, no government, or rebuilt society after all this time. Like, bro, these guys make the NCR, Freeside, or even the Legion look like peak civilization when you compare them to how slowly they've progressed over the years. I mean, they just created the Wasteland Survival Guide in the year 2277, which gives such great advice as loot supermarkets. Gee thanks, I never would have thought of that in the 200 years since the bomb dropped. In all seriousness, there's a lot more to look into here with this, especially when you bring Fallout 4 into the picture. So I recommend this video by Rad King. He goes into it all, but basically it all boils down to this is just how Bethesda likes to make their wastelands. Desperate, gross, and barely any progress. Except when it comes to the Brotherhood, they're the exception. Oh, and the Enclave. Bethesda stole the rights to Fallout from Interplay. Stole is a strong word for sure, but I think this notion comes from the fact that in a lawsuit between Interplay, the original Fallout creators, and Bethesda, it was ruled that Bethesda were the sole copyright holders, and Interplay were not permitted to make their own title, which was a project known as Project 13, which we'll get into a little later on this Iceberg, very soon coming up actually. But in regards to the copyright situation, it seems that Interplay sold the rights to Bethesda as a way of acquiring quick capital, as the company was facing potential bankruptcy. And even after this, they still ran into problems just a few years later and wanted to pursue a project that would hopefully save their company, Fallout Online, which they hoped would procure a sizable investment to, at the very least, keep them afloat. Although sometime in 2009, Bethesda filed a lawsuit to prevent the game from ever being developed. Tier 5. Betsy the Brahmin. Betsy is a cut Brahmin from Fallout New Vegas that was quite unique to say the least, given the quest tied to her. She would have appeared as just a typical water Brahmin somewhere near Freeside's North Gate, and could have accompanied the player as a companion after being purchased or stolen from the also cut NPC Kevin Hargrove. She would have been particularly useful given her carrying capacity of 600 pounds, allowing you to keep a lot of stuff on you throughout your travels. However, if the player went to sleep with at least 50 items in her inventory, then they would wake up to find Betsy gone, along with all the items that you gave her, starting the quest of tracking her down for your lost items, which would have been sold to another cut NPC named Tom Dully. The Brahmin was also a reference to another one featured in Fallout 2. Interplays Fallout Online. As we discussed, this was a planned and eventually cancelled MMORPG set in the Fallout universe, which was being developed by Interplay and Masthead Studios. Now, what I neglected to mention in the entry regarding Bethesda suing Interplay for working on this game is that they actually initially permitted the company to work on Fallout Online under the pretense that they acquire at least $30 million in funding, although it was this contract and negotiation that led to that lengthy lawsuit. Only a few screenshots of the actual game itself have been found, and not too much is known about the gameplay or plot. However, we do know it interestingly would have involved time travel, with the player seemingly going back to moments in the Fallout series, such as meeting the Master again, and also would have been mainly set in the west coast of the US, taking place in California, Arizona, Nevada, Oregon, and Utah. There were also meant to be a bunch of natural disasters which took place during the beginning of the game, like tsunamis and volcano eruptions. The game was going to have MMO elements, but would have also been a third-person shooter with a character creator, as well as multiple classes to choose from, letting you play as a ghoul, human, or super mutant. You could also join guilds with other players and participate in large quests together, and the map was even planned to be a staggering 65,000 square miles. Honestly, just from that, it already sounds better than Fallout 76, I can't lie. Horses in New Vegas. Horses are animals that I think are gravely missing from the Fallout series. You'd think they'd be a necessity of any post-apocalyptic story, as a means of travel for the characters to get around, but with Fallout it's been sorely missing, I think. You even have the opportunity to come up with some unique, irradiated, and mutated horses too. Heck, it doesn't even have to be a horse necessarily, just some sort of animal mount would be cool. But back on track here, why aren't they in New Vegas or any of the Fallout games really? Well, some think that they could possibly be extinct, or just few in number thanks to the Great War. Maybe that's why that Honest Hearts tribe is called Dead Horses. No, but for real, Chris Avallone, when asked about it in an interview, said that it was never his intention to have any horses in New Vegas, and even went as far as to remove certain mentions of them in quests, such as one in which Raoul would have actually talked about one. Sturgis is a synth. This is an interesting tidbit here, not really something ever talked about or referenced in the game, but it's possible that there was something planned here at some point. This is because while Sturgis can't be killed normally for being essential for what? I have no idea. But you can still kill him using console commands, which will reveal in his inventory a synth component. Interesting. It's even stated in Fallout Shelter Online, don't worry, we'll get to that super obscure title soon, that Sturgis is in fact a third-generation synth. Although there's not really any hints to this besides the synth component, and there's no way that Fallout Shelter Online is canon in any way. Fallout 76 is a simulation. This theory posits that the wasteland of Appalachia that we encounter in Fallout 76 isn't reality, but rather a Vault-Tec simulation of what they believe the surface would be like. And honestly, I kinda want to accept this as fact, thanks to a few things regarding the lore, namely that f***ing Mothman exists. Anyways. I'll admit I'm not too versed in the lore of 76, mostly because my Steam version of the game got permanently bricked. I tried to play it recently and it just would not let me. Saying to use the Steam version like it thought I was using their old dusty Bethesda launcher, like bruh, who do you take me for? But anyways, all that to say, I'm gonna outline this theory as shown by this Reddit post, so shout out to that guy 728, who uses the main piece of evidence for this argument, a terminal entry found in White Springs Bunker, which reads, quote, "Secretary Eckhart, please, you need to listen to me. None of the other members will take me seriously, but I believe this is of the utmost importance. We are slaves, Mr. Secretary. I've been running some tests, and I believe I've stumbled upon what I believe to be conclusive evidence that we are trapped, playing someone else's game. Virtual strategic solutions game, that is. Everything around you, Mr. Secretary, is a simulation, a projection onto your brain. VSS has trapped us in here, and it is up to us to break free. The key to our escape, I believe, lies in a small town in what we perceive to be China. It's the link to VSSS's external network. If we destroy it, it will shut down the simulation, and I believe we'll finally be free. I cannot tell you exactly why we've been imprisoned. Perhaps this is a test by the upper ranks to make us earn our way into their good graces. Perhaps VSS has trapped us in here to prevent the Enclave from stopping whatever nefarious acts they're currently visiting upon the world in our absence. But we must do something, Mr. Secretary. To fail to act is to give up the only thing that makes us men, our freedom. Essentially saying that this could have been a simulation similar to that of Tranquility Lane, or even the Anchorage Reclamation simulation featured in the Fallout 3 add-on Operation Anchorage. Also, I mean, Fallout 4 has a memory den. Like, if we can make synthetic humans and go into people's memories, then a simulation like this shouldn't be too far-fetched, right? Right? There's probably even more to go into with this, but like I said, I don't know enough about Fallout 76 to really get into it, but let me know what you guys think. No Bark Noonan is the chosen one. Now this though is a theory I can actually get behind, and honestly I believe wholeheartedly. This mostly comes down to the conspicuous references to Fallout 2 that are found in the town of Novak, the place where the strange old man No Bark Noonan lives. Those being the wrecked highwayman, a reference to the car from Fallout 2, and that gun, that's the actual name, found in the closet of the Dinobite gift shop, a unique 5.56 pistol, which is a modified version of the 223 pistol from Fallout 2. So clearly there is something about this location tied to that game, right? And well, let's look at No Bark, an old man whose age would be consistent with the Chosen One, born in 2221, who would be about 60 years old in 2281. When you talk to him though, things only get more interesting as he talks about getting stung multiple times by rad scorpions, and even coming across a talking cave rat, a pretty out there and specific thing to say. But this is something that happens to the Chosen One in Fallout 2, as you can encounter an intelligent mole rat called the Brain, as well as his brother who is the Rat King. His shack also has some particular items, such as a bunch of empty Nuka-Colas, as well as Enclave propaganda posters, which he could have easily acquired during his trip to the Enclave oil rig. But let me know what you think about this theory. New Vegas and its DLCs are a retelling of The Wizard of Oz. Reminds me of that theory that The Walking Dead is actually just Toy Story, but with zombies. Actually wait, even Toy Story had the zombies. This here though makes the claim that New Vegas was at the very least somewhat inspired by The Wizard of Oz, extending even beyond the base game and into the DLCs, especially Old World Blues. It all starts with the Yellow Brick Road, the long winding path through Nipton and Novak on the way to New Vegas until you meet the Wizard of Oz, or in this case, Mr. House. But the DLC is a much easier to see interpretation of the main quest being inspired by the Wizard of Oz, as each of the movie's 4 protagonists are represented, with Dorothy being the courier, being knocked unconscious, and waking up in a seemingly mythical place. We then search for our brain, Scarecrow, our spine, or the Lion, and our heart, the Tin Man, with the antagonist, Dr. Mobius, possibly representing the Wizard of Oz. The pint-sized slasher was real. As seen in the Tranquility Lane simulation, the pint-sized slasher was a purported serial killer that wielded a chef's knife and wore a clown mask, and was possibly also a child, leading to this sinister title. It is said, however, that the pint-sized slasher was merely a myth made to scare kids who acted out, and even ended up being a popular Halloween costume because of its mythic status, and is even the final part of Betty's tasks in the Tranquility Lane quest, with you taking on the role of the killer and murdering all of the residents wearing the costume and using the knife. However, it seems the pint-sized slasher was actually a real pre-war serial killer, described by writer Walter Munro in the Capital Post, as having committed the Linden Street slayings in July of 2052 in Germantown, Maryland. S-Lanter. Here we've got another very intriguing piece of cut content in the form of FEV mutated raccoons, which were planned to be featured in Fallout 1, with artwork showcasing what they would have looked like. The S-Lanter, as they were called, were meant to escape from the research facility where they were created. They would then go on to make a small community called the Burrows. The only official mentions of the raccoons now are a small reference found in Fallout Shelter, as well as an FEV experiment holotape which can be found in the first game. Fat Man Bell. This is sort of just a random Easter egg. The sound of the bell when you fire the Fat Man in Fallout 3 is actually the lunch bell from Bethesda's offices. Very random considering it's pretty hard to hear and just sounds like any other generic bell sound, at least to my ears.
Moriarty's oldest drink.
Brahmin synths. Well, I mean, they've created bird synths, so why not Brahmins as well, to spy on the unknowing inhabitants of the Commonwealth. But this one isn't so outwardly obvious. In fact, there's nothing concrete like the terminal entry or anything like that pointing to this conclusion, just a few strange occurrences, such as occasionally having to defend a settlement which will not be completed in the quest log until you kill a wandering Brahmin, which should normally not be hostile towards the player. Or the fact that sometimes Brahmin can be carrying synth components to signify that they were possibly third generation synths, just like what can happen with random settlers and even with Sturgis as we discussed earlier. They are also dropped by all the other third generation synth NPCs like Mayor McDonough and Paladin Dance, suggesting that yes, there may be Brahmin synths out there. The Lonesome Drifter is the mysterious stranger's son. So this is a very popular theory regarding the Lonesome Drifter, an NPC you can encounter in New Vegas just before getting to Vegas near a billboard, who only has his guitar and his mysterious magnum, which if looted off him or given to the player after completing the quest talent pool, plays an interesting sound when pulled out, similar to that of the mysterious stranger. It's also obviously a similar weapon to that used by the stranger, and on top of it all, when you talk to the Drifter, he even describes his father as strange and mysterious. I mean, what more proof do we need? Well, Joshua Sawyer basically confirmed the theory on a forum post, saying they should have made it so that if you try and target the Lonesome Drifter in VATS using the mysterious stranger, then instead of killing the Drifter, he should have targeted the player, essentially confirming their connection. Although since the stranger appears in basically all the games over hundreds of years, I always thought of him as more like a force of nature than an actual human being, but maybe that's just me. Fallout Shelter Online. This is that super obscure title I was referring to, not your regular old Fallout Online, but rather a Chinese mobile game developed by Shengqiu Games, and published officially by Bethesda as a prequel to Fallout 4. However, it has not been made available in the United States, although English translations do exist. The gameplay is pretty similar to that of Fallout Shelter that everyone knows, with a few minor differences here or there, such as new online battles, as well as a gacha-like system, and it also has a story mode, with the story taking place across 11 chapters in both the Commonwealth and Capital Wasteland, with you taking the part of the Overseer's successor to an unnamed vault, looking for the previous Overseer, while along the way, you encounter basically every known face from Fallout 3 and 4, like Preston Garvey, Dance, The Institute, Sturgis, Father, Allie Fillmore, Dogmeat, Moira Brown, Sarah Lyons, the list goes on and on. Harold also makes yet another appearance as well, so add that onto the list. Lone Wolf Radio. Lone Wolf Radio is one of the most mysterious locations in Fallout New Vegas. It is an abandoned trailer which can be found early on in the game near Good Springs, and seems to, at first glance, not have a lot going on. There's some random scrap, radios, a wasteland survival guide, a bed, and some graffiti stating, "Keep out," and "Everyone is gone. I am all alone. Let it all end." The trailer does contain most of the parts needed to fix Eddie and Primm, which is nice, but what the location is actually supposed to be is the lair of a crazy conspiracy theorist, as the designer, Denise McMurray, drew inspiration from one she had seen at the University of Oregon. So it seems this was some kind of old pirate broadcasting station during the pre-war era, of some kind of crazy guy yelling about conspiracies over the radio. However, over the years since New Vegas' release, a creepypasta and urban legend around the location was born, suggesting that a serial killer lived in the trailer, and that you could actually take quests from him, granting you a perk that would enable you to kill children in the game. Pretty interesting myth, but obviously not real. James was originally planned to be a super mutant. So this is really interesting and would have added a lot, I think, to the father character in Fallout 3, because originally he was meant to be found by the player in Vault 87 as a super mutant, which is similar to kind of what we got with the Dr. Virgil thing in Fallout 4, but also it's kind of a similar bait and switch that we got with Sean as well. But yeah, instead of finding him in Vault 112 in Tranquility Lane, this would have been the alternative, and honestly better in my opinion. Although obviously this would detract from the current ending we've got, but also fun fact, Fox uses the model that James would have had. Tier 6. Eating Baby Marie. This is actually pretty well known, but I had to put it this low on the list because of just how disturbing it is. It dates back to a video from August of 2009, which almost has 1 million views, showing in the Pit DLC the choice to eat a baby. Now, this isn't actually in the vanilla game, this is actually a mod, but there seems to have been a sort of Mandela effect situation going on, as I found some Reddit posts where people thought that this was actually a real thing, and not the product of mods, which I guess just goes to show how not only raw Fallout can be sometimes, but also how integrated the modding community is with the actual game. Also, it probably didn't help that you can actually cannibalize people in the game with the cannibal perk, so I guess many people just think they remember doing so on their bad karma playthroughs. Also, the fact that you can kidnap said baby as well might have also lended to this conclusion.
Looking for some fun? Hello?
Fallout Extreme. Fallout Extreme is another cancelled Fallout title, which was planned to be first and third person like the Bethesda games, and was being developed well before Fallout 3 for the PlayStation 2 and original Xbox, before being cancelled in November of 2000. The game is pretty obscure as it never really got anywhere, thanks to its proposal being rejected by Interplay, and was only worked on for a few months. Although some design documents did end up being leaked in 2010, showing us a bit about the planned game. For example, it was meant to be squad-based, and had you commanding a group of 4, being able to switch to the other members at any time, which could be super mutants, members of the Brotherhood, normal wastelanders, or even Native American and Mongol warriors. There was also multiplayer planned with game modes such as Capture the Flag, Squad Deathmatch, and Squad Campaign. There was also going to be player choices in the campaign, as well as fighting for and holding territories, as well as holding supply lines, much like in Fallout 4 I guess, and just like that game, the player would have a camp with additional NPCs that they could take out on missions in 4-man squads. The player group was known as The Cause and would start in Oregon, moving up towards Washington, and eventually Canada and Alaska, which sounds cool. The other main factions would have been the Brotherhood of Steel, as well as a post-war Chinese empire, which would have acted as the main antagonistic faction. The mysterious stranger is Mark. Here's another theory on the mysterious stranger, claiming that he is actually Mark, an unseen character mentioned in Fallout 1 that traveled with Harold and Richard Moreau, aka the Master, and was sent to the surface, never to be seen again. One Reddit theory post on the Fallout lore subreddit from 9 years ago, written by Albert Cole, details the main arguments behind this theory. Basically, he talks about how he, along with Richard and Harold, were exposed to FEV, with those two going on to become super mutants. Which makes sense to happen to the stranger, right? But he's clearly not a mutant, he's a human. Or is he? I mean, he's been alive for hundreds of years, but he believes it's possible his subtle exposure to FEV might have prolonged his lifespan, and made it so he had the ability to appear and disappear at will, while not directly making him a standard super mutant. Interestingly enough though, this kind of ties in with another theory that the mysterious stranger is based on the works of Mark Twain, specifically an unfinished book called The Mysterious Stranger, which depicts a guardian angel figure, also characterized as the devil, who is also referred to as number 44, similar to the caliber of the stranger's magnum. Fallout Brotherhood of Steel's God Weapons. Fallout Brotherhood of Steel, the game, has some interesting weapons that are not meant to be seen or acquired by the player, as they were god weapons used merely for testing, identical to the Beretta and Plasma Saw respectively. These items are very overpowered and capable of insta-killing basically any enemy, hence the names of these items and the fact that they do 1000 damage. Bloodmen. Ghouls are some of the most iconic creatures featured in the Fallout games, alongside super mutants of course. But originally, early on in development of the first game, ghouls were referred to as bloodmen, at least in early concept art. Just a little known random fact, I guess. Child Killer Original Image. So just on its own, this might be shocking to those who have only played games from Fallout 3 and onward, that you can actually kill children in Fallout 1 and 2. It is heavily punished by you receiving the Child Killer Reputation title, but you can do it. The consequences though are pretty severe, as one might think, as you are then hunted down by bounty hunters and lose 30 reputation points with all NPCs. This led to Fallout initially being banned in Europe because of the fact that you could kill kids. However, by now most people know about this, and it's not why it appears on here. This is the image that you see in the real game, but this was the original unused icon for the title. Yeah, pretty wild. The artist who drew it, Brian Menzie, even went on to say about it, quote, "This image was unused and the only Vault Boy image to ever be cut from Fallout 2. I'm sure you can figure out why. I remember when I got the request to do a perk illustration for Child Killer, that there would be no way to keep it from being offensive. I mean, really, how do you make an illustration of Child Killer and keep it from being offensive? Anyway, for some reason, I thought this was the least offensive way to do it. I have no idea what I was thinking. Even the designer who requested it realized it was a bad idea, so we fixed it. Looking back on it now, I can't believe I drew this. Project V13. Like stated previously, this was the original codename of Fallout Online, being developed by Interplay. However, it was also a title used for another proposed project, which was being developed likely in 2012, as it's listed on Interplay's website that Project V13 was in fact still in development. However, at this point it seems that this other project was also abandoned at some point. There is an archive that exists from the Black Isle Studios website, which states about the game, quote, Project V13 is the first planned Black Isle Studios release in years, a post-apocalyptic strategy RPG. You will create a character to represent yourself within the game world. Your character will be a hardy adventurer from a variety of backgrounds, one of the last remaining humans, a new breed mutant, or a technologically advanced cyborg. The choice is yours. Once you have determined your character's background, you will found your colony. From a deserted city, a broken down military base, or even the ruins of an oil pumping station, the colony will be yours to rebuild and control. Attract non-player characters for guards, peons, scientists, and other activities. Or if you are the type that so desires, Shanghai the NPCs. Put them to work rebuilding your society and improving your colony. Meanwhile, you will experience grand adventures to gather the resources and ancient technologies, as well as fight back against the enemy hordes. Your character will gain experience, advance skills, learn new talents, and gain access to incredibly powerful equipment, or die trying. Explore the world, meet friends, and fight your neighbors for control of resources. PV13 will be your chance to rebuild a devastated world. Fallout 2's original TV town story. One of the original story ideas for Fallout 2 was that it would be centered around a quote-unquote TV town, which was created by some sort of AI or supercomputer, with the town itself housing a bunch of 50s and 60s looking people that were actually androids, kind of similar to synths, I guess, although it ended up being cut pretty soon in development. Tier 7. Talking Deathclaws. This is just so wild that it had to be included this far down the iceberg despite it being well known, and it's still quite controversial to this day, despite Fallout 2 being a fan favorite. It's also important for another entry coming up towards the end, but yes, Fallout 2 has intelligent talking Deathclaws, which were Enclave FEV experimentations found in Vault 13. And in an alleged bugged good ending, the Deathclaws survive and actually start their own community. However, this was never intended to be in the actual game, but like I said, we'll get into that whole thing a bit later. Impossible Followers of the Apocalypse good ending. Similar to the bugged peaceful ending for the Deathclaws in Fallout 2, we have the impossible good Followers of the Apocalypse ending, which was cut from the game, despite it appearing to have been somewhat canon by the time New Vegas comes around, as the Followers of the Apocalypse do become a major influence in New California, and even a small player in New Vegas. However, the quest needed to be completed to trigger the ending was cut, involving you finding the children of the Cathedral spies in the Followers' ranks. This spy was supposed to be a character called Heather, who was also cut. The Chosen One died in a car crash. So I think this theory stems from the wrecked highwayman in New Vegas, suggesting that the Chosen One crashed their car and died right outside of Novac, which is why his gun was also taken by Cliff Briscoe and can be found in the Dinobite gift shop. However, I much prefer that Nobark is the Chosen One, and maybe he did crash his car here and forgot who he was, which is why he's so vague about Fallout 2 references and doesn't just come out and say who he was, because maybe he has no idea after getting some sort of traumatic head injury, which could have easily been caused when he crashed his highwayman and just decided to live peacefully in Novac. Deacon is the Lone Wanderer. This is kind of a wild one, but I guess if Nobark can be the Chosen One, well, maybe Deacon from Fallout 4 could be the Lone Wanderer, aka the protagonist of Fallout 3. Where does this come from? Well, Deacon is kind of a mysterious character, given that that isn't his real name, and is merely a code name given to him by the Railroad, and the fact that he wears disguises and frequently gets facial reconstructive surgery, something the player can even do in these games, making Deacon's true identity a secret. Fallout 4 takes place about 10 years after Fallout 3, in which the Lone Wanderer leaves Vault 101 at the age of 19, meaning if Deacon was the Lone Wanderer, he would be about 29, which fits. Also, the Railroad and Institute were briefly mentioned in Fallout 3, so there's that. And he also seems quite interested in Vault 111, possibly because he was a former Vault dweller himself. But beyond that, there really isn't that much evidence for this. Some think his nickname might be related to Fallout 3 and its other biblical references, but that seems like a bit of a stretch. Apparently though, he's also mentioned having visited the Capital Wasteland, so who knows. Wolpez is an intentionally bad spy. This is kind of a wild theory here. Wolpez, or Volpez as I'll call him, is one of Caesar's most trusted men and the leader of his Frumentari, a group of spies and scouts of the Legion. I'm not exactly sure where this argument stems from, although I did see it on a few of the other icebergs, so I thought I should include it. Maybe it's because Volpez is a lot of the time, despite being a spy, seen wearing his Legion attire, and not the standard Frumentari disguises that we see throughout the game. Maybe some have theorized it's because he's just a decoy and not the actual spy master, but this doesn't really make much sense or hold much weight at all. First of all, Volpez and his men single-handedly destroy the town of Nipton through his cunning, so there's that. And also, if you kill Volpez, Caesar will not be happy with you, although he still can forgive your crimes, and is possibly replaced by Illyrio, as he becomes the one to deliver the message to you from Caesar if you choose to kill Volpez upon his first introduction in Nipton. Fallout Ripped Off Wasteland. Again, ripped off, very strong words, but inspired? Yes, even a spiritual successor you could call it. I mean, some of the best games of all time have been spiritual successors. I mean, just look at BioShock. But yes, Wasteland came out before the first Fallout way back in 1988, and definitely provided strong inspiration for the Fallout series, as it centers around a post-apocalyptic America generations after a nuclear fallout. It's also a role-playing game where you have 7 main stats: intelligence, strength, luck, speed, agility, dexterity, and charisma. Sound familiar? You also gain XP through combat interactions and would have a party of up to 7 members. The game was also open world, which was pretty insane for the time. It also took place in the year 2087, close to the date of the Great War in Fallout. There are also remnants of the United States Army called the Desert Rangers. However, as some of you might know, the game was developed by Interplay and directed by Brian Fargo. So not really any stealing going on here. Similar situation, like I said, to System Shock and BioShock. Taking heavy inspiration from your own games isn't really a bad thing. Van Buren Design Documents / Fallout Bible. The Van Buren design documents, as well as the Fallout Bible, are a series of documents drafted and created by Chris Avellone, one of the most passionate writers behind Fallout 1, 2, and New Vegas. Obviously, when it comes to the Van Buren stuff, it goes into all of the planned content for that game before it was scrapped, and there's a ton there, including a lot of places, characters, and plot points, which ended up being reused later down the line, such as with New Vegas. There were complete documents delving into Hoover Dam, as well as New Canaan, the factions, and much more. You could honestly easily do a whole video on just those design docs. Then there's the Fallout Bible, which is a massive collection of documented materials released by Chris Avellone over the years in a series of 10 volumes, including a Volume 0. Avellone has since said that the Bible is no longer canon as of 2011, but it's still a great source of information on the universe, especially when it comes to the earlier titles. Tier 8. The Chosen One was canonically a Prawn Star. I believe this comes from the fact that you can receive the Prawn Star reputation title in Fallout 2, which can only be gained by starring in an adult film at the Golden Globes in New Reno, which will grant you the ability to have sex with certain characters, as well as boosts your popularity in New Reno in general, at the cost of never being able to speak to Ethel Wright again, and drug dealers charging you more. I'm not exactly sure why this is supposedly canon, but yeah, it's definitely at least an option in the game. Chris Avellone purposefully broke the peaceful Deathclaw ending in Fallout 2 to remove them from the setting. Yeah, long title, but this is in relation to those talking Deathclaws from Vault 13, and a bugged ending where they would not be killed by Frank Horgan and instead would survive, which is not something creators Chris Avellone or Tim Kaine liked, as they even regretted their inclusion in the game itself, being that they wanted Deathclaws to be scary monsters and not sentient talking beings. So there is a bit of Fallout game dev drama here, because the guy who created the talking Deathclaws went on to say that they were killed off quote-unquote behind his back, and he wasn't even down with the decision. So it seems the theory implied by this entry is that Chris Avellone purposefully broke the code so that this peaceful ending could not be achieved, as he really disliked the lore implications of the talking Deathclaws. The Courier is the lone wanderer. Here we have another pretty crazy theory, as if the life of the Courier wasn't already the most insane career of a mailman in history. Now they want us to believe that they were also the lone wanderer, hailing from Vault 101 in the Capital Wasteland, going through that whole debacle only to end up as a courier in the Mojave. Mostly though, this just stems from the fact that New Vegas takes place only 4 years after Fallout 3, and the protagonist may or may not have amnesia thanks to being shot in the head, the perfect excuse to have your player character forget everything they've gone through. However, that's what's so great about the Courier and New Vegas as a whole, because the Courier can be the lone wanderer, because they are such a blank slate. You can roleplay them as anyone. You want to be evil? That's cool. Good guy? Also cool. Play as an assassin, explosives expert, boxer, scientist, Walter White even, or the lone wanderer if that's what you want to do. It doesn't directly contradict, so if you want that to be the story of your Courier, then by all means. It's cool stories and concepts like this that make me realize even more how bad Bethesda messed up with Fallout 4 in terms of role-playing ability. First Battle of Hoover Dam was originally lost due to an orgy. So this one is definitely out there, and there isn't much info you can find on this. It just seems to be a sort of urban legend passed down the grapevine and subsequently made it onto a bunch of different Fallout icebergs. But what I'm seeing from people is that it states the original story in regards to the First Battle of Hoover Dam is, instead of making them win thanks to the cunning strategies of the NCR Rangers and Hanlon, they won due to the Legion being caught in the middle of an orgy. Yeah, it would be quite an interesting and embarrassing way to lose such an important battle, I must say. Maybe that's why Joshua Graham's punishment was so severe, though I doubt such a man would have allowed such a thing to even happen on his watch.
Dudes be like Subway socks. My brother in Christ, you made the sandwich.
And that's it for this video. I'm sure there's a ton of stuff that wasn't included on here. This series spans almost 30 years over many different games, companies, story directions, shows, multimedia platforms. There is just so much lore, world building, secrets, and theories. You can talk about this universe all day, but at some point we gotta call it. So let me know of anything you can think of that's interesting and was left off of this iceberg. Leave it down below. Also, what's your favorite Fallout game and why? Anyway, it's been me, sourcebrew. Thank you guys for watching as always, and I will see you in the next video. Take care. Peace out.